I was born in a middle-class family, and when I was very young, I had a desire and a dream to become a multimillionaire. And I found that anytime I spoke to people about my ambition to becoming a multimillionaire, I got shot down. People would say things like, money is not that important. Why do you have to be so greedy? Well, anyway, I'm glad that I aimed high because now as we look around the world and we look at the rates of inflation, it's become abundantly clear to me that that was a good and wise decision. People don't realize that they're expected to live a long time after retirement. And if you're not a millionaire or a multimillionaire, you are putting yourself in a position where you're going to go through extreme hardship at a time where you don't want to go through extreme hardship, the golden years of your life. Now, you might think that the difference between, the middle class and the multimillionaires is, that the multimillionaires probably are a little bit smarter, or that they are lucky, or they got an inheritance. But that's actually not the main difference. And what I want to do in this video is I want to talk about some of the differences that I have observed between average people financially and those who become millionaires or multimillionaires. Now, in my time as an advisor, advising a lot of people who are financially successful, but also going through the process of going from having average finances to becoming financially strong myself, one of the things I learned was that when average people have an increase in their income, they go and spend that money. Millionaires and multimillionaires, when they have an increase in their income, they invest that money. You see, if you look at most millionaires and multimillionaires, you'll never know that they're millionaires and multimillionaires because their lifestyles may not reflect that. But one thing's for sure, they always prioritize investing. And when their income increases, they don't necessarily upgrade their lifestyle, they start to increase their investments. This is one fundamental difference between how average people use their income increases and how millionaires or multimillionaires, how they use their income increases. Another difference, which is a sort of psychological difference I have found, having spent a lot of time with people who are in an average financial position versus those who are in a very strong financial position, I have found that people who are in a strong financial position generally talk a lot about ideas, whereas a lot of average people spend a lot of time talking about people. Now, you may think that this doesn't really impact how we live our lives, but I think it does. I think the fact that we talk about ideas demonstrates that we have a desire to come up with something creative. I think it kind of promotes resourcefulness. When we talk about people, we're just gossiping and bitching and wasting time. And so I think there is a fundamental difference in those who end up spending a lot of time talking about ideas and those who end up talking about people. And if you look at just, the type of people who read gossip magazines and in general engage in gossip or watch, movies and talk about celebrities, if you actually look at the financial situation of those people, it's very rare that those types of people will end up setting up some sort of an enterprise or buying assets. Their mind and their attention is simply not in that place. Those who talk about ideas, the reason they talk about ideas is because something in them is prompting them to make some sort of either make a difference or create something, or they have a vision. So one of the fundamental differences between average people and millionaires or multimillionaires is that average people talk a lot about people, whereas millionaires and multimillionaires talk a lot about ideas. Another difference that I have found between average people and millionaires or multimillionaires is that average people, when they want to do something, the first thought in their mind is, I can't afford this. So immediately when they want to do something, the first thought is, it goes into lack and thoughts of scarcity. And they start to worry about, instead of being excited about their vision, instead of being enthusiastic about the rewards of success, they start worrying about the penalties of failure. Millionaires and multimillionaires, on the other hand, whether or not they have the affordability, they start to get excited about their vision. They start to think about the rewards of their success. If they don't have the affordability, they don't say things like, I can't afford it. Their question is, how can I afford it? There are many different ways that you can start to do the things you want to do by asking that question. You see, the moment you say, I can't afford it, your mind just shuts down. It doesn't even look for a solution because your mind's already made up that there is no solution. When you say, how can I afford it? You're actually opening your mind. Your mind then starts to explore other options that you may not have considered. You may not have an answer necessarily, but the more you ask yourself that question, the more options will start to become accessible to you. And so that's one of the fundamental differences that I have found through my experience between how average people think versus how millionaires and multimillionaires think. The fourth difference that I have found between people who are in average financial situations versus those who are millionaires and multimillionaires is that average people, their education stops when they finish school or university. Millionaires and multimillionaires continue to educate themselves, continue to develop themselves because they understand that the more they know, the more they can do. They don't just read gossip magazines or watch soap operas. They're more interested in developing themselves. They understand that the more knowledge and wisdom they have, the higher the vantage point they have in terms of being able to have advanced perspectives. But if you look at the vast majority of people, they pretty much stop learning once they convince themselves that their education is complete. Unfortunately, our school and education system teaches us very little about how to become successful as an individual, how to become successful as a business person, and how to become successful financially. Millionaires and multimillionaires understand that school and university only gives you a basic foundation for survival. Rest of the education for success is something that is self-initiated. The fifth difference that I have found between people in average financial situations versus people who are millionaires and multimillionaires is that average people resist change. They don't like change. That's why they seek security and stability. Change threatens them. And millionaires and multimillionaires know that opportunities come with change. A lot of the times they're the initiators of change. They're not happy just accepting the status quo. They're always looking to see how they can improve something. And because of that attitude, they end up doing more things than a lot of average people who end up settling. You see, the change is going to come knocking whether you like it or not. The question is, are you going to be prepared for the change or are you going to be threatened by it? Those who resist change inadvertently find themselves unequipped to be able to handle change. Those who are change makers are a lot more adaptive to change. And that's one of the fundamental differences that I have observed between those who are in an average situation and those who end up becoming millionaires or multimillionaires. The sixth difference that I have found between people in average financial situations versus millionaires and multimillionaires, average people think short to medium term. They typically don't think long term. They don't really think about what's going to happen. They're not very good at exercising what I call second level consequences. They may think, I'm going to do this year, but that's about it. Millionaires and multimillionaires are thinking about 10, 15, 20 years ahead. It's no surprise that a lot of people who have studied for 5 to 10 years are multimillionaires because they have a long-term horizon. They understand the value of long-term sacrifice. People in average situations typically end up becoming addicted to instant gratification. Millionaires and multimillionaires have mastered the craft of delayed gratification. And so I think it's a prerequisite. And there was a study done by Dr. Banfield of Harvard University where he found that one of the major contributors of economic mobility was long-term orientation. And this fundamentally plays out in the lives of individuals who are long-term oriented, who end up with more financial wealth. The seventh difference that I have found between people in average situations versus millionaires and multimillionaires is that average people typically work for salaries. Millionaires and multimillionaires work for profits, whether that's profit in a business or it's profit through rental income or distributions or royalties or dividends. There's a big difference. The only way that a lot of average people know how to make money is through exchange of physical and mental exertion. But millionaires and multimillionaires know the art of using leverage to make money while they sleep. And this fundamentally comes down to how they look at money. Salary, which is exchanging your time and effort for money, or profits, which is exchanging value for money. The eighth difference that I have found, based on my observational experience, is that average people work very hard to increase their salaries. If they work hard at all, the main objective is to increase the salary. Millionaires and multimillionaires work hard on increasing their net worth. Big difference. Maybe intuitively, millionaires and multimillionaires understand that income increases don't necessarily increase wealth. It's not how much money you make, it's what you do with it that matters. And this is something that financially educated people understand. And that's why instead of just running after money, they focus on increasing their net worth. And the net worth basically means that if they stop working, they still have money coming in. The problem with only running after a salary is that the salary stops when you stop. And so if you haven't created wealth, you're putting yourself in a situation where you always have to work for money. Millionaires and multimillionaires don't just want to work for money, they want to have money work for them. And lastly, one of the differences that you will observe between people in an average financial situation versus millionaires and multimillionaires is that millionaires and multimillionaires have a high appetite for risk. They don't avoid risk, they understand risk, manage risk, transfer risk, and mitigate risk. A lot of average people simply avoid risk. If there is no risk, there is no potential for reward. And average people don't understand that. They allow their fears to dictate their decisions. Millionaires and multimillionaires understand that anything that has the potential to make them financially successful has inherent risk in it. It's not the avoidance of risk, it's the understanding and management of risk that relates to superior financial outcomes. If you've been watching my videos for a while, by now hopefully you're convinced that becoming wealthy is not just something that you do to have luxuries, it's almost an obligation to ensure that you never have to financially depend on others. It'll be great for you to evaluate what are the things that you need to work on to maximize your chances of becoming financially successful.